I used to think I was a pretty observant guy. I noticed when a customer's invoice was off by $11. I noticed when my truck's alignment was pulling half a degree left. I noticed everything except the one thing that mattered, and I've had 4 years to sit with that. My name doesn't matter for this. Call me Danny if you want a name to hang the story on. I was 31 when it happened, working as a project estimator for a commercial HVAC company in Columbus, Ohio. Steady job, steady paycheck, the kind of life you build when you've decided you're done being reckless. I'd been with Mara for 3 years. We lived together in a 2-bedroom rental off Sunbury Road, the kind of place with a gas fireplace that never quite worked right, and a neighbor who fed every stray cat in a 4-block radius. Mara worked in medical device sales. She was good at it. Good at reading people, good at knowing exactly what tone to use to close a deal or defuse an argument. I used to think that skill was one of the things I loved about her. I didn't understand yet that the same gift that made her excellent at her job made her excellent at something else too. It started on a Thursday in April. Mara came home from work, dropped her bag on the counter, and told me her college roommate Kelsey was flying in from Denver for the weekend. Girls' trip, she said. A cabin up near Hocking Hills, wine, a fire pit, the whole thing. She'd already booked it. She was sorry for the short notice. I didn't think anything of it. Kelsey was real. I'd met her twice, at Mara's sister's wedding and once at a 4th of July barbecue. Mara showed me the cabin listing on her phone, some rustic modern place with a hot tub, and it looked exactly like the kind of place 2 women in their 30s would rent to drink rosé and complain about their jobs. Nothing about it felt staged. That's the part people don't understand about good liars. They don't lie about the big things. They lie about one small thing and let the truth do the rest of the work for them. The only detail that snagged, just barely, was that she packed a black dress. Not a swimsuit and hiking boots kind of dress. A black dress with a slit up the side that she'd worn to my cousin's rehearsal dinner the year before. I asked her about it, half joking, and she said Kelsey wanted to go to some wine bar in Athens on Saturday night, and she didn't want to look like a slob. Reasonable. I let it go. That's the thing about tiny details. On their own, they're nothing. It's only in hindsight that they line up into a shape. She left Friday morning. I had the house to myself, ordered a pizza, watched a Blue Jackets game, went to bed early, normal weekend. Then Saturday afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text that wasn't meant for me. Running 20 minutes behind, tables under Grant. We're the black one. The contact name was Kelsey. But Kelsey's number, saved in my phone from a group chat about Mara's birthday 2 Christmases ago, started with a 720 area code, Denver. This text came from a 614 number, local. And the message itself didn't read like something a woman writes to another woman about a wine bar. It read like something you write to someone you're used to undressing. I didn't respond. I didn't call Mara screaming. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, staring at that message, feeling something cold move through my chest that I didn't have a name for yet. Then I did something that would define the next 6 weeks of my life. I saved the number. I didn't confront her. I decided, without fully deciding, that I was going to watch. Mara came home Sunday night, sunburned and cheerful, talking about a hike and a bottle of wine that gave her a headache. I asked how Kelsey was doing. Fine, she said. Same old Kelsey. I asked casually if they'd gone anywhere nice to eat. She mentioned a pizza place in town. Nothing about a wine bar, nothing about a table under any name. I filed that away too. Over the next 2 weeks, I did the kind of quiet, methodical work that doesn't feel like anything at the time, but adds up. I looked up the 614 number on a reverse lookup site and got nothing conclusive, just a carrier name. I checked our joint checking account, something I'd never bothered to scrutinize before, and found a charge from that Saturday. Not from a pizza place in Logan, Ohio, but from a restaurant in Dublin, 20 minutes from our own house. $211. Wine bar money, date night money. I told myself there could be an explanation. Maybe Kelsey had come back with her for a night. Maybe I was building a courtroom out of coincidences. But then came the second crack. It was a Tuesday, and Mara's phone was charging on the kitchen counter while she showered. A calendar notification popped up on the lock screen. Rob. 6:30, usual spot, no last name. I knew a Rob. Everybody who'd been to our house in the last 2 years knew a Rob. Rob Delaney, our friend from the neighborhood, the guy who had helped me replace a transmission in my driveway. The guy who came to Thanksgiving because his own family was 3 states away. The guy whose wife had left him the year before, and who Mara had spent months being such a good friend to, driving him casseroles, checking in on him, telling me how sad it was that he was struggling. Rob had been in our lives since we moved in. Rob was the last person on earth I would have suspected of anything, because Rob was practically family. That, I would learn, was exactly the point. I want to be honest about something. In the weeks that followed, there were nights I almost said something. There were nights I lay next to her, listening to her breathe, feeling like the walls of our apartment were closing in on a secret I couldn't yet prove. But every time the words got close to my mouth, I stopped myself, because I understood something crucial. If I confronted her without proof, she would talk her way out of it. She was too smart, too composed, too good at reading a room. I had watched her diffuse arguments with her sister, her boss, her own mother, using nothing but tone and timing. If I came at her with a half-formed accusation, she would turn it around on me, make me the paranoid one, the jealous one, the one who needed to apologize by the end of the conversation. I needed more than a feeling. I needed something she couldn't talk her way around. So I became someone I didn't recognize, calm, patient, almost pleasant. I started paying attention to her schedule the way I used to pay attention to project timelines at work, noticing patterns, cross-referencing, building a file in my head, and then, eventually, on my laptop, in a folder labeled Taxes 2023 that I knew she'd never open. I noticed that girls' nights with a rotating cast of friends had increased from once a month to almost weekly. I noticed that her Peloton app, still logged in on our shared iPad, showed rides logged at times she'd told me she was at a work dinner. I noticed that Rob, who used to come around for beers on Sunday afternoons while I was home, had quietly stopped coming around when I was home at all, and started, according to a comment his neighbor made to me in passing at the hardware store, helping Mara with some yard work on Wednesday afternoons. The one weekday I worked a job site 40 minutes away and never made it home before 6. Rob had a truck with a distinctive homemade ladder rack, welded crooked, something I'd teased him about a dozen times. In late May, I left work early for a dentist appointment and drove past our own street on the way home. His truck was in our driveway, not on the street, in the driveway, tucked behind Mara's Civic like it belonged there. I didn't stop, I didn't storm in. I drove past, my hands so tight on the wheel my knuckles ached, and I went to my dentist appointment, and I sat in that chair getting my teeth cleaned like a man having a completely normal Wednesday, because I had already decided that when this ended, it was going to end on my terms, with proof so complete that there would be nothing left for her to talk her way around. The next piece came from Rob himself, of all people, though he never knew he was giving it to me. We ran into each other at a gas station in early June, and out of habit, out of the ordinary friendliness we'd shared for 2 years, he asked how things were going with the Cincinnati thing. I had no idea what he meant. I smiled and said, "Oh, same as always, the way you do when you're bluffing for information." And he said something about how he figured Mara would have told me by now that she was up for a regional sales director position that would require relocating. I said, "Yeah, big decision." And he nodded like we were on the same page. We were not on the same page. Mara had never mentioned a promotion. She had never mentioned Cincinnati. But Rob knew about it before I did, which told me 2 things. First, that they were talking about things that mattered, not just having an affair, but building a whole shadow life together, one with plans and futures in it. Second, that Rob believed he was part of that future. That night, I did something I'm not proud of, though I've made peace with it. Mara had an old iPad we kept in the kitchen drawer for recipes, still logged into her iCloud from before she got her new phone. I opened Photos. I found a folder, not even hidden, just sorted under a generic album name, of pictures from a hotel room in Cincinnati, dated the same weekend she'd told me she was in Hocking Hills with Kelsey. Rob was in 3 of them, champagne glasses, her black dress on a hotel chair. I sat at our kitchen table at 11 at night, scrolling through pictures of my girlfriend and my friend, and I felt something strange happen inside me. The heartbreak was there, huge and real, but underneath it was something colder and steadier, something that felt almost like relief. The not knowing had been the worst part. Now I knew, now I could work. I spent the next 10 days building what I privately called the file, bank statements, screenshots, time-stamped and backed up to 3 different places so nothing could conveniently disappear. A printout of the hotel photos, a note of the exact dates Rob's truck had been seen in our driveway, cross-referenced with my own work schedule to prove I wasn't home on any of them. I also did one more thing, the thing that ended up mattering most. I called Kelsey, not to accuse anyone, just to ask casually how the Hocking Hills trip had been. Kelsey said, confused, "What Hocking Hills trip? I haven't seen Mara since Christmas." Kelsey had no idea she'd been used as an alibi. When I explained gently what had actually happened, Kelsey went quiet for a long moment and then said, "I'm so sorry, Danny. She told me you two broke up in March, and she needed a place to say she'd been if anyone asked. I thought it was for a work thing. I didn't ask more. That was Mara's whole method laid bare. Not one big lie, but 100 small favors called in from people who trusted her, each one thinking they were helping with something harmless. I confronted her on a Sunday morning, in the middle of June, at our kitchen table, with coffee already made, because I wanted this to be calm, not a scene. I laid the folder down, printed pages, not just a phone screen she could grab or delete. I didn't yell. I said, I know about Rob, I know about Cincinnati, I know about the job. I talked to Kelsey. She didn't cry right away. She did what she always did first. She tried to manage it. She said I was misunderstanding, that it was complicated, that Rob had been going through a hard time, and things had gotten confusing, that the Cincinnati trip was a work thing that got misread. I watched her run through her whole toolkit in real time, the same tone she used on her mother, on her boss, on me 100 times before, and for the first time in 3 years, none of it landed, because I wasn't listening for an explanation. I was just watching the lies hit a floor that wasn't there anymore. It was the photos that finally did it. I hadn't shown her those yet. When I slid the printed page across the table, her in the black dress, Rob's arm around her waist, a hotel room number visible on the key card on the nightstand, she stopped talking mid-sentence. Something in her face changed, some switch flipping from performance to panic, and for the first time in the whole conversation, she looked her actual age instead of the polished, unshakable version of herself she usually showed the world. She cried after that, but I want to be honest. Even the crying felt like a tactic that had simply stopped working, rather than a moment of real remorse. I told her I wanted her out by the end of the month. She asked if we could talk about this like adults. And I said we were talking about it like adults. This was what that looked like. The aftermath wasn't dramatic in the way movies make it look. There was no yelling in the driveway, no thrown belongings. Rob's wife had already left him the year before, so there was no second household to blow up. But word travels in a neighborhood the size of ours, and within a month, most of our mutual friends knew the shape of what had happened. Not because I told them for revenge, but because Kelsey, feeling used, told her own circle. And Rob apparently had made the mistake of telling one of his buddies who couldn't keep his mouth shut at a bar. Mara didn't get the regional director job either. I never found out exactly why, and I didn't ask. Rob stopped showing up at the places we used to all go together. I heard secondhand that he moved to Dayton the following spring. I never spoke to him again. Mara moved out on the 30th of June. I remember standing in the empty second bedroom afterward, looking at the marks on the carpet where her dresser had been. And instead of grief, what I mostly felt was quiet. The apartment was too quiet for about 2 weeks, and then it wasn't too quiet anymore. It was just mine. I want to be careful here, because I know how this kind of story is supposed to end, with the narrator triumphant, but the real ending was slower and less cinematic than that. It took me the better part of a year to trust my own read on people again, to stop scanning a locked phone screen out of old habit, to let a partner leave for a weekend without my stomach tightening. I went to therapy, which is something I'd never done before and probably should have done years earlier. I learned, slowly, the difference between being observant and being suspicious, and the difference between loving someone and monitoring them. What I keep coming back to, 4 years later, happily remarried to a woman who has never once given me a reason to open a folder labeled taxes, is this. The version of me that sat at that kitchen table in April, staring at a text message that wasn't meant for him, thought his whole life was ending. It wasn't ending. It was just finally becoming honest. I didn't lose a future that weekend. I lost a lie I'd been standing on for 3 years, and it turned out I could stand up just fine without it. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is just the truth, arriving late, dressed up as a disaster.